Thanks everyone for joining.
Thanks, everyone. I'll open up and I'm going to turn over to my colleagues before I speak. I do want to thank the CEO, National Director of the Anti-Defamation League, Jonathan Greenblatt, who's with us. Congressman Mike Gallagher is here, Wisconsin's aide, chairman of the Select Committee on the Strategic Competition between the United States and the Chinese Communist Party. Very grateful that Mike joined for his leadership. And my dear friend, the Vice Chair of the Problem Solvers Caucus, Don Bacon. And I want to thank them all for being here, and Jonathan, for your tireless work. And I want to thank Don and Mike for not only their leadership on these issues, but bravely serving in America's armed forces, being deployed to the Middle East more than once. They made sacrifices to protect and defend our freedoms. So I'm grateful for them. We're here today because there's been a serious spike in disinformation on social media. And before I dig into that, I want to turn to Mike, who I know has a limited window here to go first, if that's okay. Mike?
Yeah, perfect. Josh, thank you so much for letting me join for a few minutes. I just want to commend the work that you and Don have been. For you in particular, I can't think of someone who's been more outspoken on this issue of sort of growing anti-Semitism here in America, and then also to connect it to some of the work that we've been doing on the Select Committee on China. Obviously, a lot of this is happening on various social media platforms in general, but on TikTok in particular. For over a year now, we've been sort of thinking through the best approach to TikTok. The fundamental problem with TikTok is, of course, that it is owned by the Chinese Communist Party. So the question we have to ask ourselves is whether we want the dominant social media platform in America, one in which the majority of young Americans turn to for news, to be controlled by the Chinese Communist Party. And think about the way in which that online, the willful blindness to ongoing genocide that we are seeing in Xinjiang province. We have a growing mountain of evidence that this type of censorship, this type of misinformation is being propagated on TikTok. This is admittedly a very complex issue to legislate. I think we can get there. We have a bipartisan, bicameral bill. We've been talking with Josh, and obviously the legislative effort he's going to talk about today is related to this. And so, Josh, I just want to say thank you for shining a light on this issue. It's absolutely critical, and my hope is that we can move forward in a bipartisan fashion and confront this issue, no matter how difficult it is. That's all I got.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, buddy, and thank you for your incredible leadership. Really, we're very, very lucky to have you in the Congress. And Don, is it okay if I go for a minute,
Sure,
or you
go
want to
ahead.
go?
I'm good for 30 minutes.
Okay, great. Again, want to thank Mike and Don. I can't thank them enough. We're here, as I said, because there has been a serious spike in disinformation on social media and online since Hamas terrorists invaded Israel and brutally murdered, raped, burned alive, decapitated, and kidnapped 1,400 innocent babies, children, women, men, elderly, including many Americans. We know hundreds are still hostage, including many Americans and one young man from my district. As Israel responds to the most gruesome terrorist attack in the Jewish people since the Holocaust, some news outlets and even members of Congress have propagated anti-Israel, anti-Semitic, anti-American disinformation. Just look at the catastrophic explosion at the hospital in Gaza, that first week of the conflict. Despite U.S. intelligence available to members of Congress, some have chosen still to take the word of Hamas terrorists and spread disinformation and spread it like wildfire on Al Jazeera, TikTok, Facebook, and Twitter. Lies like these have contributed to the rise in anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. We've seen innocent lives taken here in the United States because of it. But it's not just disinformation from the media and elected officials, and of course, those on college campuses and in communities. The content on social media platforms, especially on China-owned TikTok, is being used by Russia, China, and Iran as a tool of terror, propaganda, and disinformation to influence Americans, especially younger Americans. Using TikTok, China has the ability to control an entire generation of kids sees and consumes every single day. More than, I think, 175 million people are on the platform in the United States. As my colleagues and I wrote in a letter to the DOJ, which I'll get to you in a bit, quote, in a wrongful dismissal suit filed in May, the former head of engineering for TikTok's parent company called TikTok a, quote, useful propaganda tool for the Chinese Communist Party, end quote, and claimed that CCP members, quote, guided how the company advanced core communist values, end quote. He claimed that TikTok suppressed or promoted content based on whether or not the Chinese government supported or opposed the messaging. Clearly, TikTok acts under the, quote, direction or control of the Chinese Communist Party. Not to mention the FTC fined TikTok for purposely collecting personal data of children under the age of 13 without parental consent. TikTok even confirmed that China-based employees could gain remote access to Americans' data, including public videos and comments. In fact, Chinese law obligates TikTok's parent company to, and I quote, support, assist, and cooperate with state intelligence work. Keep in mind that TikTok has more than 150 million active users in the US alone. That's why the White House called on TikTok to be sold or face a nationwide ban earlier this year. So did I. I called for that as well. Unless TikTok is sold to an American company, I will fight and continue to fight to ban the use of this rogue Chinese communist government-controlled application. America's enemies are leveraging social media to spread harmful propaganda. Social media, including TikTok, is being used as an online weapon of terror and disinformation. China has taken an anti-Israel stance following the atrocity of October 7th. The Chinese Foreign Ministry has repeatedly declined to use the words Hamas or terrorism, refuses to acknowledge the fact that Israel was attacked by Hamas. Also, a Chinese information warfare network is boosting anti-Israel, pro-Hamas narratives in the United States. That's exactly what's taking place on TikTok and other social media platforms when it comes to posts from terrorist sympathizers or terrorists themselves. China is pro-Hamas, so it only makes sense for them to push anti-Israel, anti-American content on TikTok. They have control over the algorithms so they can push pro-Hamas content. It's been reported that Iran, Russia, and China have used state media and social media platforms to support Hamas and undercut Israel and the United States. Iran's proxies in Lebanon, Syria, and Iraq have also joined the fight online, along with extremist groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS. The social media intelligence companies have documented at least 40,000 bots, fake accounts spreading lies since Hamas attacked Israel. This propaganda is being seen by hundreds of millions of people around the world, especially younger people, especially targeting younger people. The European Union has even warned platforms that they could also be fined billions if their handling of illegal content or mis and disinformation violates the Digital Services Act. A recent TikTok video seen by more than 300,000 users promoted conspiracy theories about the origins of the Hamas attacks, including false claims that they were orchestrated by the media. Another, viewed more than 100,000 times, shows a clip from a video game with a caption, quote, "The War of Israel." Some users in the comments of that video noted they'd seen the footage circulating before when Russia invaded Ukraine. And we know that Russia has met with Hamas just recently. There was a Twitter post viewed more than 20,000 times reporting to show Israelis staging civilian deaths for cameras. The Campaign for Accountability released a report identifying several accounts on Twitter sharing propaganda videos with Hamas images or linking to official Hamas websites. The bottom line is this is a massive disinformation campaign spreading to our country, spreading to young people, spreading around the world. And it's happening every single day. All this is why we're taking two major steps today. And I want to thank, again, Don Bacon for his leadership and Mike Gallagher for their leadership to make this happen, to bring common sense to this situation. And these again are two steps that we're taking in addition to reiterating that TikTok should be sold or taken down. First, and Don, who's on Armed Services, and Mike, who serves on the Intelligence Committee, can elaborate. But first, we're announcing new bipartisan legislation, the Stopping Terrorist Online Presence and Holding Accountable Tech Entities Act, known as the Stop Hate Act. And Jonathan will elaborate on this as well. This legislation will require social media companies to release detailed reports of violations to their terms of services and how they're addressing these violations, which includes using their platforms for terrorist purposes. It also requires the intelligence community to provide a threat assessment about what's happening on social media. Every day the companies fail to comply will result in a $5 million fine. That's every day. Social media companies can no longer hide the crimes taking place on their platforms, especially when they're a threat to America's national security. We're proud this bill has the backing of ADL. Second, Don, Mike, and I are writing to the Department of Justice today, urging Secretary Blinken to, urging the Attorney General to require TikTok to register as a foreign agent under the Foreign Agents Registration Act. Again, urging Secretary Blinken and the Attorney General to require TikTok to register as a foreign agent under the Foreign Agents Registration Act, or FARA. It's clear that China is using TikTok as a propaganda machine to influence Americans and collect our data. Back in 2018, a group of us wrote to the DOJ asking for Al Jazeera's subsidiary and social media platform AJ Plus to be registered as a foreign agent. The DOJ ordered AJ Plus to register as a foreign agent, citing its engagement in political activities on behalf of Qatar's government. However, to date, despite DOJ's order, neither Al Jazeera nor AJ Plus have registered under FARA. We're demanding answers to know why DOJ has not forced AJ Plus and TikTok to register as foreign agents. It's time to put an end to these online weapons of terror. This is about protecting our national security from adversaries who want to do us harm and do harm to America's standing in the world. The standing that Don and Mike help protect in the greatest country in the world. If we put our country first, I know that our best days will always be ahead. And if we have people like Don Bacon there, there's no reason they won't be. Don.
Well, thank you, Josh. And I want to just commend you with whoever's all on board listening. You've been a great friend and ally. We work together a bipartisan way. We need about 100 more of these relationships in the House, and we can probably get a lot more done. But it's been an honor to work with you. And I want to also thank Mr. Greenblatt. I think he's taken anti-Semitism and made it a bipartisan issue, an American issue to tackle. For way too long, by the time I came into Congress in 2016-17, it was really treated as a more of a, I guess, partisan way, where it was used to beat up the other party. And I think it was the wrong way to look at it. Anti-Semitism is an evil, it's repugnant. I don't care if it comes from a, quote, a right side of the aisle or left side of the aisle, it's all wrong. And I think that Mr. Greenblatt has made that very clear. So I'm grateful for your influence there. And I just want to piggyback on something that Congressman Gottheimer said. It's interesting that China has TikTok in China and they have TikTok in America, and it's totally different. TikTok in America is meant to be corrosive, addictive to our youth, not value added in their life, actually degrading to their life. But if you go to China and look at TikTok in China, it is meant to be very educational and aspirational for the Chinese youth. It's interesting that they target the Chinese youth and the American youth in totally different ways using the TikTok platform. And what interested me about this legislation, when Josh came forward and asked me about it, this is his idea. I want to commend him for. I'm glad to partner with him on it. I served 4 times in Iraq and Afghanistan. I was on General Petraeus' staff in 2007 and 8, and I was working in the information operations realm. Al-Qaeda in Iraq used social media to recruit and to fundraise. And they used social media extensively to recruit from in the entire Middle East region. And a lot of their funding came from social media uses. And so therefore, I saw the need all the way back from 2007 and 8, how terrorists use social media platforms. We've already seen how Hamas is using TikTok, right? And it's also meant to recruit and to fundraise. And I think through that, they've also fueled the anti-Semitism that we see in America and all over the Western world and all over the world. And social media is helping fuel that anti-Semitism. So Josh was able to quickly sell me on his idea. I'm glad to partner with him on it. And I think Josh went through what the bill's trying to do. Each social media company needs to have a policy. And they need to have a policy that's how they're going to counter or use their platforms. And they have the Attorney General, we're asking our intelligence agencies to also provide us assessments and summaries of how terrorists are using social media so we can learn and keep improving our policy. But I want to duplicate everything that Josh said. He said it very thoroughly, but I'm glad to partner with him and to support his effort, like I do in many other things that Josh does. And so with that, I'll yield back.
Thanks, Don. Really, really grateful for you. And Don and I are very extra grateful that we have a special guest who is, you talk about a man who has not wavered one bit, not only these last weeks, but these last years in the face of any anti-Semitic activity, who also stands up to hate of every kind. And I want to make that very clear. Any kind of hate, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, he's there speaking out and not afraid to speak out, even when they're tough conversations. So I just want to thank him. He's become a very good friend, and he's just such an incredible leader, and we're lucky in our country to have him. Jonathan Greenblatt.
Well, that is very kind of you to say, Congressman Gottheimer and Congressman Bacon. I so appreciate your comments as well. Thanks to both of you for really modeling the kind of bipartisan leadership, the kind of intra-party collaboration we so desperately need in this country. I think your work in the Problem Solvers Caucus is laudable. And literally, I hope at some point this will be the largest caucus in Congress. And maybe one day we won't even need it because people will be working so well together on both sides. ADL is the oldest anti-hate organization in America. We've been fighting anti-Semitism and all forms of bigotry for 110 years. And yet we have literally never seen a moment like this in the United States. Since the Hamas massacre of 1,400 innocent civilians and the seizure of approximately 240 hostages kidnapped and dragged into Gaza, we've seen a tsunami of anti-Semitism, hate, disinformation, and propaganda. And the single most consequential, significant super spreader of hate today is social media and messaging platforms. Propaganda and inflammatory language against Jews are proliferating at record levels. By the way, Muslim and Arab American allies too are experiencing a spike in hate. As ADL has long documented, online rhetoric can lead to offline violence. That's very concerning right now. It's very concerning because at ADL, we're tracking hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of anti-Semitic incidents. Our Center on Extremism reports 619 anti-Semitic acts between October 7th and November the 6th, the vast majority of which, 2/3 of which, were directly related to the war in Israel. By comparison, during the same period of time, only 166 incidents last year, and even fewer that were Israel, much fewer that were Israel related. So this is almost a 300% increase year over year. And it's stunning when you consider that we were already dealing with record levels of anti-Semitism before the massacre, as Congressman Bacon was alluding to. And the hate is spreading to college campuses. We've seen a surge of atrocious incidents that really have us deeply concerned on our college campuses. A spike, almost 100 that have happened that are directly linked to the ongoing conflict between Hamas and Israel. And by the way, Hamas has threatened to live stream the execution of hundreds of hostages, documenting its atrocities and inspiring copycat extremists around the world. Terrorists like Hamas, and by the way, in case anyone is unclear here, let me be crystal clear. Anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. What you saw happen in Israel, what you're seeing happen now in America, this is the destination that the bus of anti-Zionism drives toward. Hatred against Jews, full stop. And Hamas is the same as ISIS, it's the same as Al-Qaeda, it's the same as Boko Haram. It is a terror organization, period, end of story. And like Al-Qaeda and like like ISIS, Hamas uses social media to stoke violence, to syndicate propaganda, to raise funds, posing what the FBI has presented as a threat to the homeland. Hamas just doesn't threaten Jews. They threaten Americans. Hamas murdered dozens and dozens of Americans on the 7th. Hamas is holding Americans bound and gagged in their tunnels beneath Gaza. And Hamas has repeatedly threatened Americans again and again and again. And although the social media companies have publicly announced they're going to try to stem the extremist content, their tools, their policies are way lagging behind. These platforms have a responsibility. They are some of the most profitable companies in the world. They're some of the most innovative companies in the history of business. It is not too much to get them to eject the anti-Zionists. It is not too much to get them to halt the flow of raw hate. You know what's hard? What's hard is building a business that generates scores of billions of dollars in revenue. You know what's not so hard? Putting the bigots back in the box. Getting them off your platform once and for all. That's why ADL applauds Congressman Gottheimer and Congressman Bacon for working together on this bipartisan legislation to ensure that users and policymakers have accurate information, so we simply hold these companies accountable for their efforts in curbing terrorism. We're not asking for anything special here, nothing. We're simply asking these companies to play by the same rules that every other business in America abides by, to be transparent, to have accurate reporting, so we can understand, if you will, almost like a nutrition label about what's going on underneath the hood. Once again, Congressman Gottheimer, Congressman Bacon, thank you for your service. Thank you for your leadership. We're proud to support you.
Phenomenal. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Again, Jonathan Greenblatt, CEO and president of ADL Anti-Defamation League. Thank you so much. We'll now turn and open up to any questions that people have. I know we lose Don in about 3 minutes.
For any press who are on, if you could raise your hand. Okay, we have Chase Williams. I'm gonna unmute you now.
Thanks, Congressman. So we've seen a lot recently, kind of both houses of Congress looking to try and ban TikTok and kind of crack down on what they're doing. And we've seen, lobbying efforts from them, the most lobbying we've seen from them in history. So how does that factor in here when you guys are trying to, cut down on hate speech and whatnot, and, kind of make it a safer website?
Don, you want that? Or are you good?
I do. I think you're a better expert on it than I, but I think TikTok, what bothers me is they have a set of rules for Americans and a set of rules for Chinese, and it's aspirational, educational in China, and it's meant to do the opposite here in the United States. And so right away, I have a problem with what TikTok's doing to our youth. And the fact that it's being used by Hamas in an extensive way should be dealt with. And I think there needs to be penalties. And first of all, they got to have a policy, and they should be watching what they're doing, and there should be penalties if they don't follow the law and their own policies that we're going to make them have on this particular topic. But with that, Josh, please do better.
And no, I was just going to add to that. It's like if you look at what Mike has done with the select committee, Mike Alger, and what he's found and said, and in terms of findings on TikTok, I think they may be lobbying, but it doesn't change the facts. The facts are there's strong bipartisan support for and including out of the White House in terms of stopping TikTok from what they're doing to with their propaganda campaigns online, and which is why the White House and others, including me, have called for them to be shut down or sold. And I think that is a growing sentiment as we're seeing their disinformation campaigns only explode. And with the fact that China, Iran, Russia, working closely with Hamas in this case, and of course against Ukraine as well with their propaganda machine. This is about national security. China's an adversary. Again, they're connected to Iran and Russia and support Hamas. And so we got to get this done to protect our country and, of course, our children. Any other questions?
Any other questions? You just have to raise your hand.
Okay, seeing none, we're good. Thanks, everyone. Thank you so much.